In a shocking turn of events that has left royal watchers stunned, a recent decision within the British royal family has reportedly moved Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, to tears. Known for her resilience and kindness despite years of public criticism, Fergie, as she is lovingly called by fans, has endured many challenges throughout her life. But this time, the unexpected royal decision struck her in a deeply personal way. What truly happened behind palace walls, and why did it affect Sarah so profoundly? Let's uncover the royal decision that brought Sarah Ferguson to tears. At the heart of this dramatic situation lies Royal Lodge, the magnificent 30-room mansion situated in Windsor Great Park. For years, Prince Andrew has refused to leave the property. To him, it's more than just a home. It's a fortress and a symbol of his pride and defiance. The estate, maintained under questionable financial circumstances, has long been surrounded by whispers of unpaid debts, secret renovation deals, and a royal family eager to see him gone. But Royal Lodge wasn't only made of bricks and history, it was a statement: I'm still here. For King Charles, that message had become unacceptable. Behind closed doors, Charles made one thing crystal clear: every scandal comes with a price. After the Jeffrey Epstein connection, the public humiliation, and the endless media backlash, the king decided it was time for Andrew to finally pay that price. Not with money, but with silence. This was never about forgiveness. It was about control and containment. It was a royal strategy to quiet the noise, erase the headlines, and protect the monarchy's image once and for all. The plan was simple but chilling. Andrew would give up Royal Lodge in exchange for 2 smaller homes and one promise that would follow him for the rest of his life: eternal silence. At first, Andrew resisted the idea. He argued, delayed, and refused to give in. But then came Sarah Ferguson, the ever-resilient Duchess of York, who had survived some of the harshest royal scandals. Once mocked by the press and sidelined by palace insiders, Sarah had always found a way to stand tall. This time, she saw what Andrew could not: a chance to secure their future and preserve the small shred of dignity they had left. But the cost was steep. It was 2024, and tensions at Windsor were at their peak. King Charles's health was being closely monitored. Prince William was taking on more power, and Queen Camilla's influence was steadily increasing. The monarchy was desperate to modernize its image and tighten its control before the next generation officially took the throne. Yet Andrew clung to Royal Lodge like a ghost haunting the royal past. Rumors spread that Charles had offered him Frogmore Cottage or another smaller property, but Andrew refused. Losing Royal Lodge to him meant losing his last connection to royal life. Even stripped of his duties, titles, and his mother's favor, the mansion was proof that he still belonged, at least symbolically, within the royal circle. Eventually, King Charles's patience ran out. He drew a firm line between being a brother and being a monarch. The offer turned into an order: 2 smaller homes in exchange for a lifetime of silence. Reports suggest the deal included a strict legal gag that would forbid Andrew and Sarah from ever speaking about the royal family, their finances, or their years at Royal Lodge. No books, no documentaries, no interviews, not even private conversations off the record. For Charles, this was all about preserving his legacy and maintaining control. With his health uncertain and his reign under constant scrutiny, he wanted to make sure no more royal secrets reached the public. Sarah, however, was the unpredictable factor. She knew better than anyone how deeply the royal family feared loose tongues. Once, she had sold her stories to the press for money. Now she was being paid to stay silent. But could it be that the silence Charles demanded wasn't meant to conceal shame, but to protect something or someone? In the world of royalty, money and reputation are inseparable. One wrong move, one exposed secret, and centuries of carefully crafted perfection could crumble overnight. Prince Andrew's scandal with Jeffrey Epstein nearly destroyed that image once before, and King Charles knows the monarchy could never survive another catastrophe like that, especially now when the royal family struggles to prove its integrity in a world that no longer blindly idolizes crowns and titles. That's why this story is so important. It's not just about an eviction. It's a royal cleansing, a deliberate purge designed to protect the crown at all costs. It's as though the monarchy is rewriting its own story before anyone else can reveal it. Still, there's something undeniably tragic about this so-called final verdict. Imagine Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson, once dining with Queen Elizabeth II, watching their daughters play on palace lawns, waving from the Buckingham Palace balcony, now being quietly pushed aside with nothing but a signed document and a promise of silence. No public farewell, no statement, no explanation, just whispers hidden behind heavy doors and buried under royal secrecy. But those who know Sarah Ferguson know she's never been one to stay quiet for long. And that makes this situation dangerous. Because the more you try to silence someone, the more others lean in to hear what they're not allowed to say. The tabloids call it a peaceful resolution. Palace insiders describe it as necessary. But others within those same walls whisper a different phrase altogether: a royal payoff. Silenced, exiled, paid off. That's what some claim to have witnessed in the confidential documents after months of tense negotiations behind palace doors. Imagine signing your name, knowing it's the last time you'll publicly acknowledge who you used to be, trading your voice for comfort, surrendering your truth, your memories, and your story to someone else's legacy. And that's what makes this deal so unsettling. Beneath the polished surface of royal PR lies the stench of fear. Fear of exposure, fear of losing control, fear of what could still come to light. The most chilling rumor of all suggests that the contract doesn't end with their lives, it extends beyond death. Their letters, diaries, and unfinished memoirs can never be released without royal approval. A silence meant to last even beyond the grave. But in royal history, secrets never stay buried forever. Whispers are already circulating that Sarah may have kept a copy of the deal or confided in someone she trusts. Somewhere, it seems, a clock has started ticking, because every secret the monarchy hides eventually resurfaces. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but soon. And when that truth finally emerges, the truth behind this deal and King Charles's ultimate decision, it could shake the very foundation of royal power in a way no abdication or scandal ever has. And what came next would change everything, something no one ever saw coming. It all started with a letter that was never meant for anyone's eyes. It was written on thick cream paper, sealed with the royal crest pressed in deep red wax, and bore the unmistakable handwriting of a king who had finally lost his patience. For months, perhaps even years, King Charles had tolerated his younger brother's quiet defiance, his refusal to vacate the property, his subtle gossip leaks, and his desperate attempts to restore his tarnished dignity. But now, as winter, rain swept across the ancient stones of Windsor, a letter left Buckingham Palace carrying a message that was both simple and devastating. What did it say? Let's find out. Inside Royal Lodge, the air grew heavy with unease when the letter arrived. It was placed carefully on the same polished desk where Prince Andrew had once signed military orders, and later his personal apologies. The man who once wore his uniform with pride was now facing the harshest accusation of all, being the monarchy's greatest burden. This was no ordinary warning. It carried the full authority of the crown. When Sarah Ferguson read it, her heart sank. The tone was unmistakable, cold, formal, and polite in a way that barely concealed the threat beneath. His Majesty requests your immediate cooperation. That was all it said, but the meaning was clear: obey or be destroyed. There was no warmth, no brotherly affection, No invitation to talk things over. This was royal power at its purest, distant, commanding, and absolute. Behind the king's signature stood an entire machine: advisors, lawyers, private secretaries, and most notably, Queen Camilla. Whispers inside the palace claimed that she had pushed hardest for this move. To her, Andrew wasn't family. He was a reminder of scandal, a stain on the reputation she and Charles had fought to rebuild. The time for quiet tolerance had passed, but Charles's decision wasn't born of anger alone. It was about control. For months, the palace had been quietly reorganizing royal finances and estates. The aim was to cut costs, modernize the institution, and prepare for what insiders called the next era. Every royal residence was under review, every pound of taxpayer money accounted for. The public wanted transparency, and Charles understood that. Yet amid all these changes stood Andrew, refusing to leave his vast 30-room estate, still funded by the Crown estate. Critics were calling the king too soft in his reforms, and Andrew's stubbornness had become the perfect example of unchecked royal privilege. Something had to change, and Charles decided that Andrew would be the first test. This letter wasn't just an eviction notice, it was a test of loyalty. Would Andrew finally submit to his brother's authority, or continue pretending that royal rules didn't apply to him? The king already knew the likely answer. Andrew had always been difficult, entitled, reckless, and convinced of his own untouchability. "The Duke has made his position clear. He will not leave his home," one aide reportedly told the press. But behind that defiance was fear. Deep down, Andrew knew that once he left Royal Lodge, he would never be allowed back. For Sarah Ferguson, the situation was even more precarious. She had built her life on a careful balance, close enough to royalty to enjoy its protection, but distant enough to profit from it when times got tough. Her relationship with Charles had always been cordial, sometimes even friendly, but now she could sense the shift. The king was finished being generous. This was no longer family business, it was royal business, and that terrified her. Without Royal Lodge, she would lose everything: her status, her identity, her connection to Windsor. Without that address, she'd be just another former duchess clinging to old memories. Sarah had spent years rebuilding her public image as the friendly duchess, the down-to-earth royal outsider. Losing Royal Lodge would mean losing not just her home, but her story, her platform, and her influence. Yet she was no stranger to crisis. She had survived scandal before and always found a way to turn adversity into opportunity. When Andrew showed her the letter, she didn't cry or panic. She calmly poured herself a drink, settled into her velvet chair, and said, "If he wants us gone, then let's make it worth his while." It was a daring, even dangerous response, but that was Sarah Ferguson. Clever, fearless, and unpredictable when cornered. She wasn't just worried about losing a property. She was thinking about losing leverage, the last bit of power she still had. Over the years, she had gathered stories, letters, and memories that could make even the most seasoned royal aide nervous. She had witnessed Queen Elizabeth II's reign, Princess Diana's tragedy, Prince William and Kate's rise, and Andrew's fall. She knew things, and the palace knew she did. The threat wasn't just about a home anymore. It was about secrets. And if there was one thing the monarchy feared more than scandal, it was exposure. Sarah Ferguson knew exactly how to use that fear. Meanwhile, within palace walls, another conversation was unfolding, one that added urgency to the entire matter. Whispers about King Charles's health had begun circulating among courtiers and royal doctors. The monarchy was preparing for the future, and in that future, there was no room for lingering scandals or stubborn relics of the past. So how did King Charles plan to end the Andrew problem once and for all? For Charles, time was running out, not in years, but in authority. He knew that once Prince William's era began, all unfinished business would become his son's burden. And nothing was more unresolved than his brother Andrew, the prince who refused to fade quietly after scandal and disgrace. For Charles, this wasn't about property anymore. It was about cleansing the royal image before passing the torch. He sent one final letter, formal, firm, and final. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of responding through lawyers or aides, Andrew asked for a private meeting, just the two of them, face to face, brother to brother. No one knew whether he planned to beg or to threaten, but Charles agreed reluctantly. The meeting took place at Clarence House behind closed doors. No aides, no advisors, just two brothers who hadn't trusted each other in years. Those nearby later described the atmosphere as freezing cold and thick with tension. Charles spoke first, his voice steady and emotionless. "You will leave Royal Lodge within the year." Andrew's face tightened as he snapped back. Andrew reminded the king that his lease was entirely legitimate, one that had been personally approved by their late mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and that he had spent millions of pounds renovating the estate. But Charles did not waver. His voice remained steady as he declared, "The monarchy cannot carry you any longer." In that moment, Andrew understood that his brother was no longer speaking as family, but as the King of England. The authority in Charles's tone was final. Still, Andrew could not stay silent. He lashed out, throwing Charles's own past back at him, the controversies, the criticism, the scandals. "You were forgiven," Andrew hissed. "Why not me?" The room fell silent, heavy like smoke. Charles looked at him for a long moment, not in anger, but with a mix of pity and quiet disgust. Then softly he replied, "Because I learned from mine." That ended the conversation. Charles rose and left the room. Andrew sat frozen, staring at the closed door for nearly 10 minutes before finally moving. Later, when Sarah Ferguson asked how it went, he answered quietly, "He's made up his mind." That night, for the first time in years, Royal Lodge went dark. The next morning, Charles took an unexpected step. Rather than contacting Andrew directly, his private secretary reached out to Sarah Ferguson. The king wanted to speak with her personally, knowing she was the pragmatic one, the negotiator who understood how power truly worked behind palace doors. The call was short but clear. "His Majesty wishes to make an arrangement that benefits all parties." Sarah immediately understood what that meant. This wasn't an offer. It was an invitation to name her price. For years, Sarah had been on the outside looking in, the Duchess who fell from grace, the woman who always needed permission to return to royal circles. But now the king's office was calling her. The balance of power had shifted and she felt it. After years of exclusion, that sudden sense of control was intoxicating. She began to plan, not simply a deal but a masterstroke, one that would surprise even Charles. Her goal was clear, to ensure that she and Andrew could leave Royal Lodge on their own terms, with comfort, silence, and financial security guaranteed. Sarah wasn't just negotiating a move, she was rewriting royal history. She understood that what Charles wanted most was control, and she decided to sell it back to him. But this time the price was not money, it was property. 2 homes, separate but close enough to maintain the illusion of unity. "If we're leaving the lodge," she reportedly told a friend, "we're not going quietly. We'll need something to show for it." And so, secret negotiations began, known only to those inside Buckingham Palace and Windsor Castle. Lawyers drafted documents. Advisors debated public opinion. Queen Camilla, by several accounts, was furious, believing the king was being far too generous. But Charles was no longer acting out of emotion. He was thinking like a monarch. He knew that securing silence was far more valuable than keeping a mansion. For the first time in decades, he saw a way to close the book on his brother's scandal once and for all. This was the start of Sarah Ferguson's silent rebellion, a rare act of defiance in royal history. She had done what few ever dared, turned a royal threat into a negotiation. With her trademark charm and disarming smile, she knew exactly what she was doing. King Charles might hold the crown, but Sarah understood something essential about him. He feared bad publicity more than confrontation. He could not afford another headline about family chaos or greed. That knowledge gave Sarah real power, the kind that could shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Behind her warmth and laughter, she had always been a survivor. From her early days at the palace to her fall from royal favor, she learned that secrets were currency. Every whisper, every letter, every offhand remark had value. And now she was prepared to use them. For years, she and Prince Andrew had lived as shadows of their former selves, divorced, yet inseparable. Their life together was unconventional, even by royal standards. They shared breakfast, exchanged gifts, and quietly supported each other through the humiliation of Andrew's disgrace. The public could never quite define them. Exes, friends, companions. But for Sarah, none of that mattered. Royal Lodge had become her sanctuary, her last piece of stability after decades of turmoil. Losing it would mean losing her only safe place, and that she could not accept without a fight. If King Charles wanted them gone, he would have to make it worth her while. Inside Buckingham Palace, reactions were divided. Some of Charles's advisors were furious. If you reward defiance, one warned, you invite rebellion. To them, negotiating with Andrew and Sarah was unthinkable. But others, more strategic, saw the value. Let them have what they want, one courtier advised coldly. Their silence will cost less than their scandal. Charles hated that reasoning. He had always believed in discipline and dignity. Yet he also knew the danger of doing nothing. Between Andrew's temper and Sarah's charisma, one careless remark could undo years of royal image building. So Charles hesitated. And in that hesitation, Sarah seized her moment. Through her lawyers, she sent her proposal. She and Andrew would vacate Royal Lodge, but only under two conditions. First, they wanted 2 privately owned homes with no royal oversight. Second, all records of their finances, past and future, must be permanently sealed. It was a shrewd move. By asking for secrecy, they transformed silence into a formal royal agreement. If Charles refused, the refusal itself would raise suspicion. When the proposal landed on his desk, tensions inside the palace erupted. Queen Camilla, closely following every development, was livid. "We're not paying them to behave," she snapped. "Let him live in a flat in York if he needs a roof." Charles, however, was conflicted. Camilla was right in principle, but wrong in optics. Throwing his brother out with nothing would appear cruel to the public, especially since Sarah had recently battled serious health issues and gained sympathy for her strength. The king's compassion was quietly being tested, even if no one dared to say it aloud. That night, restless and unable to sleep, Charles paced the dim halls of Clarence House, the faint scent of cigars and polished wood in the air. The next morning, he summoned his private secretary. "Prepare the papers," he said quietly, "but include a clause, a lifetime clause." When Andrew's lawyers received the draft, outrage followed. "This is censorship," one advisor shouted. "They want you to disappear." Andrew exploded in anger, slamming his hand on the table. "After everything I've done for this family," he roared, "this is how they treat me?" But deep down, he knew the truth. He had brought this on himself. Sarah, however, remained calm. She read every line carefully, and where others saw punishment, she saw opportunity. To her, this wasn't exile. It was leverage disguised as silence. So, what do you think about the shocking royal decision that brought Sarah to tears? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.